Good morning and welcome to Bible Truth for Kids. Have you ever wondered what Jesus looked like? Do you remember in our first video of Matthew, we talked about that nobody knows what Jesus looked like. And so that's why every time you see a picture of Jesus, he looks different because people just draw him the way that they think he looked. But I found a picture. And for me, I always imagined that this is what Jesus looked like because in this picture, he is so full of joy. And that's what Jesus was, full of joy. And the people loved him, and he loved the people. Well, actually, not everybody loved him. There was a group of people called the Pharisees. They were actually considered enemies of Jesus. They did not like him at all. Partly because they were jealous of him. And Jesus could do miracles, and they didn't know where he got the power to do these miracles from. And it infuriated them that he would do these miracles often on a Sabbath, which was their holy day. I mean, they considered healing was work, and you weren't supposed to work on the Sabbath. But mostly, it was because Jesus claimed to be the Son of God that they hated him. Now, they were always coming to Jesus, interrupting him, always trying to find a way to trap him and trick him into saying something that was against God's law. And that way they would be able to prove, well, you're not the Son of God then. Well, one day they came to Jesus where he was teaching. And the Pharisees had a complaint. They said, we want to know why your followers don't obey the rules that we have made. Because, the Pharisees, they were the religious leaders, and they were the ones who were supposed to teach the people God's law. And so they said, we have a complaint. They thought their rules were just as important as God's laws. They said, we have a complaint. We want to know why your disciples eat without washing their hands. Would your mom let you eat with hands that looked like this? Well, you know what? Jesus didn't even answer their question. Now, it wasn't that because God had not given commands about being clean, but the Pharisees, over the years, they had made up their own rules, and they added their rules. They thought they were just as important as God's laws. They said, you have to wash your hands in a certain way, and you have to use a certain amount of water when you do that. And you have to wash your hands at certain times of the day. So they had added to God's rules, and this was not at all what God had commanded. And God said to them, your rules have become more important than God's word. He said that the prophet Isaiah talked about those Pharisees hundreds of years ago. In the book of Isaiah, through God, Isaiah said this about them. He said that those people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. What that meant was the Pharisees would say, oh, we love God. But in their hearts, they said, we're not going to do what he says. They weren't. They were just pretending to love God. It looked like they loved God, but they didn't. Jesus said to them, it's not eating with unwashed hands that makes you unclean in God's eyes. It's not that. It's what's in your heart. It's the sin that's in your heart. The lying, the stealing, the cheating, saying bad things about other people. These are the things that make you unclean in God's eyes, not eating with unwashed hands. People that love God will want to do the things that please God. Now, I just took this cup out of the dishwasher, and it's perfectly clean. I can use it for drinking my coffee. Or can I? Oh, the inside is really dirty. I can't use that cup. Jesus said to the Pharisees, that's what you're like. You want to be like that cup on the outside. Looks nice and clean, but on the inside, it's full of dirt. He said, that's what your hearts are like. And then you know what? He turned to the people And he said, don't listen to the Pharisees. Wow, don't listen to them. He said they don't know where they're going. You know, following the Pharisees is like following a blind person who doesn't know where they're going. You'll fall off the cliff with them. Jesus always had an answer for those Pharisees. You know, I think secretly the people liked it when the Pharisees came out, because no matter how hard they tried, they were never able to trick Jesus. Jesus always had an answer for them. Now, shortly after this, Jesus left this area. So Jesus mostly was always around the Sea of Galilee in this area. But now he took his disciples way up here to a place called Tyre and Sidon. You know, it wasn't part of Israel. It was a completely different part. And the people up here, they did not really know anything about the one true God. But Jesus wanted to take his disciples away for a while so that they could rest, and so that he could train them, and so that they wouldn't constantly be interrupted, especially by the Pharisees. Now, when he got up to that area, Jesus found a house and he went into it, and he didn't want anyone to know where he was. But you know, Jesus just can't be hidden. People up there heard that he was up there with his disciples. They said, hey, you know what? You know that teacher from Galilee and one does miracles and stuff? Like, he's up here. He's in our area. So he couldn't stay hidden for long. And a woman found him. She was a Gentile woman. That means that she was not a Jew. But she came to Jesus and she bowed down, right? She just kneeled down right at his feet and she begged him. She said, Jesus, I need you to heal my daughter. She's possessed by a demon and it torments her severely. Well, you know, Jesus didn't even answer her. I mean, he didn't ignore her, but he just didn't answer her. But she was persistent. She kept coming back. And finally, the disciples said to Jesus, like, could you just tell that woman to go away? She keeps bugging us. She keeps pestering us every day. And I mean, we can't do anything to help her. Just send her away. Well, now, do you remember, we had a Bible story about Jesus sending out his 12 disciples. And when he had sent them out, like, they were to go to other towns and they were to preach the good news and they were to do miracles. But Jesus had said to them, when you go, don't go into the towns where there aren't any Jews. Not yet. And so Jesus turned to his disciples after, kind of complaining to him. He reminded them, he said, the Jews were promised a Messiah. They waited a long, long time for the Messiah, and then he came. He was born King of the Jews. You know, Jesus is talking about himself. Now he said, I was called to the Jews. Should I just ignore what I was called to do and then just go into other towns, to other people that I wasn't promised to? Well, and then he turned to the woman who was standing there, and he explained it to her in a little bit of a different way, but he was also testing her faith. He said, supposing a family is getting ready for dinner and they're promised a beautiful loaf of bread, and they're brought the loaf of bread and it looks beautiful, should they just take that loaf of bread and feed it to the pets that are underneath the table? Is it for them? Well, you know, the woman thought for a moment and she said, no, it's not for them. But she said, you know what? The dogs under the table, those pets, they get to eat the breadcrumbs. You know what she was saying? What she was saying, I know that I'm not a Jew. I know that I'm an outsider. But I am begging you for mercy and for compassion. Just like pets will sometimes beg us for crumbs, she was begging Jesus to do something for her. And you know, Jesus honored her faith and he healed her daughter. She was made well again. Isn't that wonderful? Well, Jesus stayed up in that area for about 6 months with his disciples because they needed to be trained. He needed to teach them many things. And it was easier to do without crowds and crowds of people around and without those Pharisees constantly interrupting them. But after about 6 months, Jesus and his disciples returned. Now, they had gone up this way, but they came back this way. Right down into this area is called Decapolis. It's kind of outside here. And he went up to a mountainside with his disciples. Now, the mountains in this area were a little bit more rugged than they were around the Sea of Galilee. And most of the people around here, they weren't Jews either. But they heard Jesus was up on the mountain. And so they came. Well, who came? Women came, and the men came. And they brought their sick, the sick from the family and their friends. They had to help carry people up who couldn't walk by themselves. They had to help blind people see the way because they didn't know where they were going. Who else came? Men who couldn't walk with crippled backs. Fathers brought their children who had fevers. Jesus healed everyone. He healed cripples. He healed people that had leprosy. He healed the lame. He healed the blind. He helped people see. He healed people from evil spirits. Can you imagine, how noisy it must have been up there? You know, how exciting it was when people were healed, all the shouting and thanking Jesus, and so much excitement. Well, you know, they were up there 3 days. Jesus was healing everyone. And after 3 days, Jesus said to the disciples, listen, I want to send them away, but I can't send them away without giving them something to eat. And the disciples said, what? You know that there's over 4,000 people here. What are we going to feed them with? I think that they had forgotten that Jesus had just fed 5,000 people not that long ago. And Jesus said, well, how much food do you have? And they said, well, we have 7 loaves and some fish, and, I don't know. Jesus said, bring that food to me. Well, they brought it. He thanked God for it, and then he handed it out to the disciples, and they began to distribute it. And again, they never ran out. Over 4,000 people. They all had enough to eat. No complaints. And this time, after everyone had been fed, they collected 7 basketfuls of leftovers. Yeah, with Jesus, nothing is impossible. Now, what I want you to especially remember from today's story is this, that true faith begins in the heart. Just like that Gentile woman had faith in her heart, Jesus honored it. He will honor your faith too, no matter how small it is. Okay, see you next time.